Hi guys, welcome back to the podcast. In this podcast, we're going to talk about how to get a PhD in France. So, in order to talk about all the intricacies, I have invited my friend Frederic. He has done his PhD from France, and right now he's working as a postdoctoral researcher in France. So he knows all the intricacies about getting into PhD in France. What are the things that we should look for while finding our PhD in France? So welcome to the podcast, Frederic, and thanks for giving us your time and sharing the information.
Thank you very much, Deepak.
Okay, so what I will do is I will straight away ask you my first question. Like most of the time, people, those who want to do PhD, they have this question in their mind, like, how long is your PhD and how the course structure look like when you want to do a PhD in France. So that's something important. What do you think about it?
So I did my PhD in University of Lorraine, which is in the east of France.
Yeah.
So my PhD lasted for 3 years,
Okay.
with 3 months, which was like 3 months with the extension of COVID.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say that in France, most of the PhD, I know, like I have a few friends who have also done a PhD here in France,
Okay.
is between 3 to 4 years,
Okay.
depending on various like things that is happening during your PhD, because your supervisor may have more funding and you can extend probably 6 months beyond like 3 years. Mm-hmm. But for most of the people, the PhD is 3 years. In terms of courses in France, so when you are doing your PhD, you most of the time you are in a lab doing research, which depends on what you're doing. Myself, I was like in a lab because I was doing a PhD in material science. Yeah. So my typical day was in the morning, depending on the availability of some of the machines that you are using. Yeah. And then when you not doing that, you're mostly doing literature review. Yeah. But also your laboratory, which is attached to university, can like propose some of the courses that you can attend, which are very important for your thesis. Yeah. So those courses, actually, you don't do any exam. So you have to attend those courses. Okay. And then tell your supervisor or your doctoral school that you have attended those courses, because you have to justify that you attended those courses. So you don't have like courses that you do exams, but you can attend like some courses that are important for your PhD. Mm-hmm. And yeah, that's most of them. So if you're going to do a PhD, don't think that it's like the master's course or the undergraduate course. Yeah, the most important thing is like research. So you can attend courses that help you do your research, because you will be evaluated based on what you will produce in terms of papers or like a patent if you are doing some like hardcore engineering stuff. So yeah, that's how can I say the structure.
Yeah, that's right. Usually the course structure, like the reason why people do this course structure is like the courses, it's because like they have to complete some certain credits in order to get their PhD degree, right? So is it like the same in France? Like you attend a course and you get some credits which are used to complete the credits required to get the PhD degree. Is it like that?
Yeah, because for my case, I will say my personal case, probably other university have like different things, but you have to have like, I was supposed to have like 30 credits, which can come from like the courses you attended, which can come also from the seminars that you attended. It can come from your publication, or if you have made a paper. So each of those contribute to the overall credit that you need to graduate as a PhD student. So you can, it's like you can't attend because they are divided. There are like the technical courses that you can do. If, for example, you're doing, I say material science, you may need, for example, if you're using like a microscope, you can attend the courses related to the microscope, which can give you like 2 credits. And also you can attend some courses, which is like, for example, on employment for your future. So they are not random. Most of the time they are proposed by your graduate school, and then you have to attend of them, and you have to have a certain amount of credits to be able to graduate. So it's not facultative, it's obligatory. You have to do them for you to graduate. So, but you don't have to do exams for them. You have to attend them. That's the most important message.
I think it was almost the same for me in the UK and in Australia, because what I was supposed to do was I was supposed to get 40 credits to fulfill that criteria of like getting the credits. So what I did was like in some of the cases I presented the case that I learned these things. I went to these workshops, I went to these seminars and earned some credits. So yeah, I think it's all more or less the same. I think everywhere. Like, I'm not generalizing, but yeah, more or less it's all the same.
It's the same.
So another important question that usually, like, which was there in my mind when I was like starting my PhD was like, when should I start, like, when should we start looking for a PhD position, no matter like whether you're looking for it in France, and if you can like specifically talk about France, like, but in general, like, what do you think should be the time when you should start looking for a PhD position? And also talk about the thing that whether is it possible, like, because in the UK it was possible for some of the universities to get the PhD directly after your bachelor's, but is it possible in France that you can directly go to PhD after your bachelor, or you have to have a master's degree to get into PhD?
So I will start by my personal experience. So when I started my master's, I have in my mind the idea of starting a PhD. So I started like looking around, asking friends like who have already done PhDs in different countries. And I actually applied when I was in my final year of a master's, like in January, which was like for the PhD, which was going to start in September, because most of the PhD opportunities are open in that period of time. So I applied while I was in my final year of a master's, because I already knew that I will be pursuing a PhD afterwards. So that's So I would say for someone who wants to do a PhD, he should be able in his, like, when he starts his master's, to think about like what are the possible interests that he or she has in terms of research. It will help like to decide which of the project, because sometimes if you don't do enough research and you pursue a certain topic and then in the middle you realize it's not your interest, it may be a problem. So as you start your master's, if you are thinking about doing a PhD, it's good to follow like LinkedIn pages, go on website of universities to look at things that interest you. So that's something you have to do. And for the application, it's important to start as early as possible. So I will say in your final year of your master's, you can start sending like emails to various like professors, because nowadays most of people are on internet, so you can find the emails, you can find the LinkedIn pages. So that's one of the thing in terms of like the time that I would say in the final years or in the final year of your master's. The second question you asked about if you can directly go to a PhD program after your bachelor, I would say it's not the case in France. But you have like special cases where you have, for example, a scholarship that gives you the possibility to do a master's and afterward do a PhD program. That you have a scholarship that combine both of them. But for France, in the general cases, to be admitted to a PhD program, you must have a master's degree. So it's how it is. In that particular cases, it's like few universities that are really specific in terms of what they want, because they want, for example, a master's person to be like very how can I say, if we do a master's in a certain topic, you are with the professors and they know you and they can give like a PhD project afterward. But for in that program, you have to have like a master's, even if that the scholarship is combined. The condition is that to be registered as like a PhD student, you have to have a master's program. I know it's different from some countries where you can do it, but in France, that's the main condition to pursue a master's program. Anyways, one additional thing I can say, also in France, you have like the engineering schools, where some people do like 5 years and they have like what they call like, it's like engineering school. It's like when you go to English speaking countries, they have like masters of engineering, where you can do in UK, I think it's 4 years, but in France it's 5 years. Still it's the same level as someone who did like his bachelor degree for 3 years and then 2 years in his master's. So
it's kind of like a dual degree program, like where you can combine both like bachelor's and master's degree, right?
Still they call it a master's. That's why for those people, they can actually go to PhD program directly, even if they have like a combined program that lasts for 5 years. So that's how I can try to provide information on that particular case.
That's great. So you talked about like some of the ways how you can get into PhDs. Like, for example, you talked about like you should start writing email in the final year and also like contact people on LinkedIn. So can you like give us some ways like how you can find a PhD position? For example, like are there certain website which people can look into? For example, like website from CNRS, because which is like the major research organization here, and also like what do you suggest, like writing an email to people would be good, or right? What are the ways you think we should, like a person should approach if he or she wants to do a PhD?
So I would say like you have to have at least free approach. You can have many if you want, but I think the first thing is to decide which of the field you want to pursue your PhD in, depending on what you're studying on your master's level, because it will determine whether a supervisor will accept you or not. So that's the first thing, the decision of saying like I'm going to pursue a PhD, and then like in which field. That's the important thing. So the second thing I would say is like to ask people. I would say whether you know like former PhD students in countries that you want to pursue a PhD in. For example, it is easier to find someone who has done a PhD in France or in UK or in other country of the world. Ask them about like how is it to do a PhD in that particular country. Also, you can ask them about like a project of the previous supervisor and all those details. So that's like in terms of connecting with people who has done like PhD and done the same thing as others. And then try to connect with other people on LinkedIn. So I think like for most of the PhD people, if you approach them in a good way, they will be able to help you like as we do for other activities. And then the third thing is like to go deeper into your research to find which are the open projects. So you can do it by visiting like the laboratories, if you know the name of certain laboratories. That's why in the second step I told you about like the knowing some people. You can't know everyone, but you can know people and ask them about information. Like it's very popular now on LinkedIn. So it's very important to be very active on these social media. So the first thing is like there are like you can search on laboratories if you know the name, because in France you have like a university which has like different labs which are attached to it. So whether it's in science, in medical studies, whether it's in economics. So find university, find the lab, try to find like what is there in that particular lab. And then you may know like some people send an email to professors if you don't see if they have like projects. And then you can also try to find like there are some websites that are particularly advertising PhD projects in France. So which, for example, you talked about CNRS, which is one of the research institute of the French government. You can also try some like a specific website. For my case, I find my PhD on a page called ABG. Claude Bernard, which is like a website that advises most PhD projects that are open. Also, you have ScholarTip, I think .com, which also does have like, many projects in different countries. And with like your research, you can find others. I also, for your case, you know some projects. But I would say that's how you can approach in those 3 steps your search for a PhD. I know you have done your PhD, you know, like a few more tips you can give them, but but it's to balance those 3 aspects in your search for your PhD. So I mean,
like you mentioned, I think all the points. I think these days what is important for you to be aware about what's happening around you and what are the things you are interested in. For example, like usually it's very important for us to connect with people these days, and LinkedIn and Twitter, I guess these 2 are like very important platforms where you should be there and you should be sharing your research, you should be trying to contact people. And you know, one of the ways which I like about LinkedIn is like when you press like on any of the posts, so that thing is shared with like almost all your people, like whoever is connected to you. So that's important. So that's why like it's very important for you to connect with different people from your field or like from other fields. So what happens is sometimes when they click like, you can see what's there, and sometimes it might be important for you. And also like as you mentioned, like there are websites. I will put all the links in the description section which are important. So I think like you mentioned everything.
One other point I can add, you can also because that's why the decision is very important. If you decide to pursue a PhD, you can, and you know your particular field, you have on LinkedIn or on Twitter different, like most of the professors now, they are on these social medias. So you can follow the posts, because they nowadays they will post like if they have projects, because they want to recruit the best candidates. And find the best candidate is very important. So you may be the best candidate for the post of PhD, but you need to be able to follow them, know what's going on in their own project, and then you can update also your LinkedIn profile to add like your work
experience.
Because for my case, one of the professors contacted me like, I have this good project and you can be a fit for it. So because I was on the platform, so it's very helpful to be very active on these social media. They can be very, very important in terms of finding the right opportunity for you. So I
mean, networking is anyhow important. So I think we can take it forward to another question from like which I have picked up from your whatever you said in your statements. So one of the important things which I feel is important, things is like you need to understand what you want to do. Like I think you also mentioned that you need to figure out what project you want to get into, because sometimes after joining the project you might feel that, oh, this is something which I do not want to do. So like let's talk about like how important it is, or like what are the things that a person should look for before joining in for any project. Like let's talk on this topic with respect to the lab, like the facilities in the lab, or from the perspective of how to think whether this project is for me or not.
So that's a very difficult and interesting question, because you can approach it in a subjective way or in a general way. On a personal level, you need, for example, for most of the PhD in France, you have like supervisors who are experts in a particular domain. So it will be very difficult for you, for example, to pursue a PhD in a field you didn't know before. So that's one of the important things. For example, if you're going to we'll talk about science, because I don't have experience in other fields, but some people can translate in their own field. For example, if you're going to do a PhD in material science, for example, in metallurgy, for example, doing characterization, of materials, you should make sure that the lab you're going in has all those facilities.
Yes.
Because, for example, if you're doing a PhD in a certain field and the laboratory doesn't have those facilities, you'll be obliged to move around. If we like it, it's good, but it may not be a good thing for you. So you have to make sure that you read about the lab, you understand if it's a small or a bigger lab. You need also to research about the facilities if they have like the things that you want, because with your masters you have probably done your internship, or you have done, or you know someone who has done something. So you should be able to find all those information, whether you are researching the laboratory, or you are also researching the laboratory, or also you are like, you have to read the PhD
availability of the machines that you will be using, or availability of, like, also, like as you mentioned, like sometimes, like it's very difficult, even if you want to move, sometimes it's very difficult if things are not available at your place, right? You need to take time from someone if you are going to someone's lab, although and then it takes time to do everything, travel, everything. And like in PhD, you have limited time and you have to finish a lot of things, right? So it's important to look for all these things, like for example, the machines and also the capabilities of your supervisors. And one of the points that I liked what you mentioned was that we should also think about, like we should also try to know about the professor, because I mean, I will want you to expand on it further, because sometimes it's also important to, to know how your professor works. Because sometimes it's very difficult to work with few professors. Like, sometimes some professors are so pushy without any reason, right? So what do you think about it?
So I would say, like, you can. So there are, like, on a general level, you can look for your supervisor in terms of what he's writing about, his research interests. You have Google Scholar. You can, even if you are a master's student, you are doing some project that you need, like, to do some research. You can go on Google Scholar, search for your professor, what is he doing. You can also see, like, the tweets, to see or tweets or LinkedIn, the posts or other things. And sometimes the worst case scenario is you don't have any information. So I will say, if you arrive in the lab, you have the first thing you have to make friends. And then because, like, if it's a supervisor, he has also other students or other things. So it's very important to have discussion, not like to say, like, is it a bad or good person, because you are, like, professionals, you are working in the field, but, like, to know few things you shouldn't do or things you should do, that's, like, something you ask your friends when you arrive in the lab. So to be able to navigate, because, for example, my case, I was international students. It was my first time in France. So I had, like, I joined, like, my supervisor has, like, students from, like, different countries. So I had a conversation with them, like, to understand, like, what are the things I shouldn't do, what are the things I should do, not in terms of, like, the limitation, but in terms of, like, living in a different environment, because, like, we have, like, different cultures, we have different way of life. So you have to find a way to fit with other people, not like to go away from your values, but we live in a multicultural world. You have to try to make sure you are not how can I say,
like it's important, from the perspective, another perspective as well, like this gives you, like, if you are there and if you have your colleague, you should talk to those people, because it will help you increase your network. And, like, in future, when you will be a professor or, like, in an industry, it will be useful for you to have these connections, like, to do some, like, good research work. And also sometimes, like, your supervisor is not easily available. So sometimes technically you do not understand a lot of things when you are reading your research for the first time. So it's important to have connection so that you can discuss with your colleagues and your peers. So it also helps in your research, right? And then you
it helps in your research, also in like
that's right.
Supervisors, the administration and everything. So you try to be friendly, because you're going in a new environment. You are going to be a researcher. You will collaborate with like different like people, so you have to be able to
network,
to have a conversation. So most of those details. So we will talk about, for example, the language afterward, but also try to capture
so let's talk about it now, not afterwards. Let's talk about it now, because in France, what I have felt is like language is a bigger problem. So what do you think, like, how difficult the language is it easy for a person who does not know French to get a PhD, and also like how easy it is to survive without knowing French? Like, what do you think about it?
So I will start by talking a bit about what I was the point I was talking about is, like, when you arrive in a new environment, you have to learn a few things, because it's not like someone is coming in your house and telling you, like, Deepak, just run things like this, because that's how I do in my house. So I have to come and just run what you do, and probably if I see something, I say, like, probably if you do this can be better. That's how it is. So to approach the question, in France, for my case, I didn't know French. And because in research, nowadays, most of research are done in English. So some of the supervisors will say, like, probably you need to speak English, but nowadays there are many supervisors and many international students who are in the lab, so who do not speak any French. So in terms of research, it's not very important, as long as you have done an interview with your supervisor and knows that you know English, you have the
good knowledge of the subject.
You know the subject. It's not obligatory in terms of your work to know French. So if we want to apply for a PhD, sometimes some of the supervisors will say, like, you have to do it in French, but most of them that I saw, they have PhDs who do not speak any French. So that's not a problem in terms of your, what can I say, academic field. But you need also for like your survival, I will say, for living in another country, you are probably required to catch few words. So, and there are also opportunities for PhD students to pursue French. So they call like French for foreigners coming in France. So you can, most of the universities, they have those courses which are open for PhD students. So they can attend those courses to know the basics. How do you greet someone? What do you do when you go in a shop? Like, most of those things, you need them, because you need to talk to people. And you know, like, the administration here, most of the things are in French. So if you can catch few words, for example, to say, I don't speak French, like, when you say it in French, they can give you probably someone who speaks English. It's like say, like, je ne parle pas anglais. Donc you can be helpful in terms of like communicating with other people, so they know all those details. I will say it's probably not very difficult, but depending on your capacity, or with also your how PhD is very like intensive in terms of your work, it may not be easy to learn like the French, but you can still have like
no, but like also because PhD is not like a 2 months thing, it's like a 3 or 4
years
thing. So you also have to make friends outside your work, right? Those who, and most of the time it happens is like, what I have noticed is like a lot of people do not speak French, and like you need to learn the local language so that you can interact with people. When you go out, in order to make friends and in order to do shopping and like all this stuff, you need to learn at least basic French so that you can conversate. But I think like 3 years is a very long period. If you put in like efforts of like 1 hour per day, possibly you will be able to speak it at least the basic level after 1 year.
That is actually what I did. So when I came in France, I knew a little bit of French, but when I started speaking, like people were saying, "What do you mean?" So I had to attend the French courses which was like free for me because I was a PhD student. So that was like one of the important things that I did when I arrived in France. So I would say like if you're coming like to study in France, or most of the time you have the opportunity to have like French courses, I would advise someone who comes in France to do it, because it will help. Like even if you think it's not important, like few words won't kill you. It's, for example, when I'm learning like few words in Hindu, so I speak them, or in Spanish or in Cantonese, I can learn a few words to discuss with someone. So that's important, mainly to live, also to make friends, because
that's right. Okay, Frederic, let's move on to the next question, which is like, I think let's talk about the general job prospects after your PhD and how easy it is to get a job in France after doing your PhD, and also like talk about it from the perspective of both like industry as well as like academia, right? So
so in France, like any other countries, also people do not think about the job when they are doing studies. Most of the time you think about it when you are graduating. But one thing that I liked in France is that beginning of your PhD, you have like various people who are like saying like, if you want to pursue academics, these are the courses you have to follow. If you want to go the industry, this is the things you have to follow. You talked about the credits for graduation. In my doctoral school, I had like these opportunities. Like when I want to do the academics, I have to pursue certain courses. And if you go into industry, you have to pursue certain courses. So you have that choices. So you have also to think about it when you start your PhD. Where do I want to go after your PhD? And after your PhD, at the end of your final year, you need to ask your supervisors to provide you a few contacts. You have also made some contact while doing your PhD. So it's very important that you do that as well. And I would say for in France, for doing like a postdoc, it's very easier. You can do postdoc in any country you want. So if you want to be in academics, you have to know or just connect with people while you're doing your PhD. It will be easier when you finish to go to a postdoc. If you want to do a job, it may take a little bit of time, but it's possible because you have now like various like international companies which are in different fields. Because for example, you have like Thermo Fisher, which is everywhere. You have Oxford Instrument. I'm talking about my field, but in the other field also you have like, for example, in economics, I saw that the KPMG is everywhere.
KPMG.
So, and then you have like, French, like they have like various companies which are really active. For example, in our field, we have like ArcelorMittal, we have Total, which are those like working in material science. You can also apply for those jobs, but you need also to be able to connect with people, know people as well. So it's very important. I would say like in France, it's not easier to get a job, but if you make your research and do the application as you should, you are able to get a job.
And I think here, if you learn French during your PhD, it might be helpful for you to get a job quicker, because usually like usually if you want to stay in France after your PhD, it's important for you to learn the language, right? It might be useful for you to like, if you learn the language, it will be easy for you to get the job, because usually I think this is one of the perspectives like people usually ask for, like when they are recruiting, because possibly it is a possibility that whilst you are working for any of these companies, like you will be, especially like when you are into academics, you will have to teach people, right? Like, and most of the teachings here are like in French, so it will be useful for you if you learn French. And if you want to settle down here for citizenship, that's one of the requirements. So it's important for you to learn the language.
Yeah, I would say if you're going for a French company, you are required to be bilingual. Bilingual is like you can speak English and French. So if you want to go in a French company, you should start thinking about it while starting your PhD, because it will be required. Even you don't have to be an expert in French, but if you can communicate in French, it will be easier, because they also have like these international franchise, if I can say franchise or anything, because they probably have a company in Africa, a company in Asia, a company in the United States. If you can speak both of the language, it's helpful for them. But you have to think, like in academics, it may not be that difficult. If you become, for example, a senior researcher, you may be doing own research, so you may not need French, but still you need to speak French to communicate with some people who do not speak like French, or for example, in the meetings. Some people will prefer to speak in French. So if you know the basic of French, it may be helpful. So it's very important in terms of finding a job afterward, depending on which of the pathway you want to follow to learn the French language. But France is one of the world powers, so they have like different, like you have like posts that you can apply for. So because they have like a large number of companies. Also, they have university if you want to pursue your career in terms of academics. That's how I can answer the question, but still, it's
Okay, Frederic, thank you so much for giving your time to us. I think more or less I have touched upon all the points which usually are like required when you want to do your PhD. Is there anything you want to end, like at the end?
So one of the problem that you can have as international students is like how do I get funding for my PhD? So in France, I know in terms of like in science how it is. I may be wrong or not wrong in other subjects, but in France, for most of the PhD, they are fully funded as international students. So if you apply for a project, most of the time on the advertisement, you have all the details, the professors, the subject, and also the salary, because you have like they call it doctoral contract, which is that the French government has put in, like if you want to do a PhD, this is the amount they have to pay you. So it's a bit universal. If you're working for like a research, fundamental research, or if you're working for a research for a company, you can earn a little bit more, but it's not a big difference. So most of the time it's fully funded, and you have to talk to your supervisor if you have also additional how can I say, additional money that is on the project. But most of the time in science, for my case, it was fully funded in terms of like the salary, because they are not going to pay for your visa unless it's another scholarship. But you will have to pay for your visa, your travels, but you will get paid. So it's like a job, which actually you can, in France, you can use it as work experience, because nowadays they want to promote a PhD in France. So the 3 years that you do your PhD, consider it as 3 years of research. Even if in academic, in industry, they are still a problem, try to give a value to a PhD in terms of experience that you have done research. But still on your legal documents in France, you are qualified as like a talent, because you are doing research. That's why they give like a passport, which is like talent passport.
Because
you are a researcher that is coming to France to do research. So that's one of the point that I wanted to discuss, because most students will ask, where do I get the funding? You can even also, if you find a supervisor, you can also fund your own PhD. But
you can write for scholarship. Like there are scholarships like Marie Curie scholarships, and there are certain other scholarships that you can apply for. In fact, if you approach a supervisor and like with the right in a right way, so you can collaborate with your supervisor and write a proposal with or to any company like which you are interested in, and then basically you can get funding from there also to support your research through your toward your PhD. So that's another way. So like there are multiple ways if you want to get get funding. In fact, some of the times what I have noticed is that there are like certain programs which give you some funding for attending some conferences or for attending for some workshops and related to your research. But it's just like you have to write a very good proposal in order to get that thing.
The funding, yeah. That's nice. Yeah.
Okay, Frederic, thank you so much for giving us the time. Thank you so much, guys, for watching the entire episode. Now, if you have any questions or if you want me to make a podcast or invite someone for any particular question, you can leave your questions in the comment sections. And also, please like, share, and subscribe to my channel so that you can get all the information. And also, please don't forget to press the bell icon.